Imagine two people defending opposite positions on a moral question. One argues from natural law and the other from social contract. They reach the same conclusion. And now, someone says, see, the proposition is neutral. It means the same thing from either framework. But does it? This is precisely where Rudolf Carnap's notion of semantic rules becomes philosophically explosive. A proposition doesn't float above linguistic frameworks in some clean, assumption free space. It lives inside a linguistic framework, and the framework determines what counts as its content. When we say something cannot be false, that modal force, that necessity, is not a property of the sentence. It is a product of the rules that govern how the sentence connects to everything else. Carnap's semantic rules function almost like anabolic devices for cognition. They do not merely label or classify, they build. They take a bare synthetic structure and lever it into something metabolically richer. Modal relationships, inferential continuity, essential connections between concepts. The necessity is not in the words, it is synthesized by the rules. This means content identity across frameworks is not given. It must be constructed, and it is never neutral. Now, this brings some new challenges. Once you accept that semantic rules are doing this much work, that the way we process inferences over a language layer matters more than logic alone. Once you accept that, logic itself begins to look parasitic. Parasitic on the very language it was supposed to ground. This opens the door to a deep skepticism about logical exceptionalism. The idea that logic has some privileged, framework-independent authority. And it's no accident that one of Carnap's own students would take this thread and pull it until the entire fabric came undone.
But now a question surfaces that Carnap never fully answered. If all we have to do is choose a language, if the depth of our necessities, the cost of our truths, the floors of our meaning, are all products of a linguistic framework we selected, then how do we make that selection without already smuggling in assumptions about how a language ought to behave?
Imagine a language in which certain scientific laws are syntactically hard-coded, not discovered, not earned through evidence. They are just built into the grammar itself, so that any observation gets filtered through them before it can even register as a challenge. The laws are not conclusions inside that language. They are the walls. You would never know you were trapped. And this is precisely why Quine could refuse Carnap's theory of meaning without simply being a skeptic. He was not denying that meaning exists. He was refusing to let it off the hook. His demand was methodological. Hypotheses about meaning should be selected the way we select all natural theories. by how well they answer to evidence, by how much explanatory work they actually do, by whether they earn their place, and not by which linguistic framework we happened to walk into. We should not write a blank promissory note for bachelors are unmarried simply because it appears in a convenient position inside our chosen language. Convenience is not necessity. Position is not proof. The fact that the truth falls out effortlessly from our framework is not evidence that the framework is tracking something real. It may only be evidence that we built the framework to produce exactly that result. What Quine opened does not close here. Actually, I have pursued a solution by Michael Dummett, and I will present it here. It's in my published article called Reconciling Logical Pluralism with Meaning Theoretical Stability. As we saw, once the choice of a language already amounts to the projection of a framework, once the necessities generated by a system are partly consequences of the inferential machinery built into it. Once that happened, logic itself appears to lose any neutral ground. The framework produces the very forms of necessity it later discovers. But there is a response to this problem, and it emerges from Michael Dummett. He was working not to preserve classical logic, but to revise it. He argued that the possibility of replacing classical logic with intuitionistic or constructive systems in certain domains does not abolish logic's foundational role. It relocates it.
On page 66 of The Logical Basis of Metaphysics, Dummett argues that model-theoretical semantics alone cannot adjudicate disputes about what inferential structures or what classical or non-classical logic are actually doing the cognitive work inside reasoning itself.
The center of gravity shifts away from metaphysical privilege and toward something more austere. The capacity of a logical system to preserve inferential harmony, to sustain stable practices of assertion and justification, without allowing meaning itself to disintegrate across linguistic activity.
For Dummett, a proof is not merely a chain of valid steps, it is a distribution of inferential weight across a semantic structure. A conclusion overreaches when the meaning theory beneath the proof cannot bear the load it attempts to carry. Without inferential harmony, one loses the ability to explain why a conclusion follows from this meaning theory rather than from an incompatible one. The conclusion may survive, but its semantic entitlement becomes opaque. Harmony concerns the reconciliation between how we verify and how we draw consequences. The audit of reasoning must follow a trajectory whose inferential direction cannot simply be reversed without collapsing the meaning that licensed it. A proof becomes non-harmonic when inference extracts more than verification can sustain. In mathematics, the danger is not mere inconsistency, but the emergence of theorem trajectories no longer transparently grounded in the justificatory role of the axioms themselves.
Logic becomes less a mirror of a supersensible order and more a discipline for regulating inferential movement under conditions of uncertainty. The strange inversion is this: non-classical logics offer a proof-theoretical heuristic, and it asks more from the cognitive work behind the inference itself. It's more honest about what the logical inference is actually doing, the muscles it is activating, and the versions of the possible and the necessary that are more in line with the limits of what one can prove.